Welcome to Body Sculpt of New York 6 Weeks to Fitness podcast, where we hope to inform, motivate, encourage, and inspire you towards living a healthier lifestyle. And now, here's your host, the president of Body Sculpt of New York, Vince Ferguson.
Hi, I'm Vince Ferguson. Welcome to 6 Weeks of Fitness, episode 196. Thank you so much for joining me today. Dr. Sanaz Hariri is an orthopedic surgeon who specializes in the diagnosis and treatment of shoulder and knee pain. Dr. Hariri is an expert in minimally invasive techniques for shoulder and knee arthroscopy and knee replacement. She has treated players in many elite athlete organizations, including the Stanford football and basketball teams, the United Football League, and the San Jose Ballet. And here today, during National Nutrition Month, to talk about the importance of movement, hydration, and how to achieve a healthy and injury-free body is Dr. Sanaz Hariri. Dr. Hariri, how are you today?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show. It's really a pleasure having you. But before we talk about hydration, movement, all that good stuff, tell my listeners and my audience, where did you grow up and what inspired you, doctor, to become an orthopedic surgeon?
Well, so this is a really funny timing for this as well, because there's actually a book that's coming out soon in about 5 days called Brilliance Beyond Borders, which is actually a chapter about my story. So I was born in Tehran. My parents happily had been Western educated. So my dad went to UCLA and my mom went to University of Indiana. And the revolution happened in 1979 in Iran. And so I was born in 77. I was about 2 when it happened. And so we came to the United States as refugees, and very grateful for where we were lucky enough to wind up. And the thing that resonated with me throughout that experience of growing up is that, you know, everything can be taken away, but your health and your education are things that you just carry with you. And you just have to invest in both of those things, because those are the things that are intrinsic to you that cannot be taken away, that can get you through if things go very wrong. And, you know, of course, it's very much in my mind right now, looking over at Ukraine and these poor people and thinking about what really is the essence of who you are and what you can take with you. So education was really important to me. I knew that having my parents have been Western educated really helped us come here and build back. And so I'm also just naturally really curious and just obsessed with information. And so that's been very important to me growing up, is reading, just reading a lot and finding people who are experts in their fields and listening to them and mentors. And so I grew up in Menlo Park, California. I went to Harvard for my undergraduate degree. I went to Stanford for medical school. I went back to Harvard for my orthopedic surgery residency. And I stayed there for a knee replacement fellowship. And then I came back to Stanford for a sports and arthroscopy fellowship. So my real focus is knees and shoulders. Part of what I really value is being really, really good at what you do. And it's not going to be everything. You really just got to hone down on what your forte is. And that I really want to be able to tell people when I'm doing something, particularly if I'm operating on someone, that I'm telling you, nobody can do this better in the world, as well as me, but not better. And that's really important for me to have the confidence when I'm speaking to somebody, especially if something as important as surgery, which is what I do, is that I can have that confidence. I've studied hard, I've trained in the best places, and I really just do what I know I'm the best at. And so I think that's just in general for life, that everybody should sort of find what they're really good at, what they're really passionate about it, and then just dig into that so that you have that confidence to know that what you're doing, nobody is better than you, or at least you're in that top echelon.
Wow, that's awesome. I would imagine the athletes who put their trust in you, their body in your hands, I bet they're very happy to put their bodies in your hands because you believe the way you do, you know?
And just as important as, you know, the people who are doing things, athletics for their living, is, you know, the weekend warriors and the people who are just doing their own meaningful life and need to stay healthy in order to be able to sustain that for their careers, for their families, for their communities. And so just a very small percentage of people are people who are earning a living based on their health, but that drives everything else for people who are making a difference in their communities and their families. And it's sort of like, you know, that in the airplanes, they say, you know, when the oxygen comes down, you know, put it on somebody else, put it on yourself first before you put on somebody else. You got to take care of yourself before you can take care of other people.
Yes. Oh, most definitely. Now, when you see these athletes, what are some of the common injuries that you see?
So very commonly for knees, I'll go into is weight bearing flexion. So a lot of people will ask me, how can I be active and not wear down my body, right? And you know, I actually was listening to one of your podcasts with, it was Chris Mandarino recently.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic interview. And
Thank you.
so he was saying that there's so much emphasis on fitness and very little emphasis on nutrition.
True.
And really, it's the opposite. It's what's the cart and what's the horse? Well, got to put the horse first before the cart, right?
Right.
And that's really nutrition. The fitness comes. And so, you know, I'll have people come in and like, oh, I'm starting to run because I want to lose weight. I'm like, no. You cannot be running to lose weight. You've got to lose weight and then maintain it by running. So I'm getting back to saying what my main point is: nutrition and BMI, your body mass index. You know, it's especially I deal with longitudinal knees. I deal with young people with ACLs, meniscus. I deal with my older patients with total knees. I'm doing, you know, meniscectomies one day and meniscus repairs and ACL repairs, and then the other day I'm replacing the whole knee. And so I've seen the whole gamut. And how you avoid getting to that part in large part is really your nutrition and your weight. And so you really want to dial in on your computer the BMI calculator. Where are you? What is your BMI? What's your body mass index? Because, you know, especially the front of your knee, your patellofemoral compartment, which is really the vast majority of knee issues, is driven by overloading that compartment. So A, being overweight, because you're feeling 4 to 6 times your body weight in the patellofemoral compartment, the front of your knee, and B, doing activities that minimize overload of that front of the knee. So I could list all of them, but I'd rather just tell you the mechanics of it, which is weight bearing flexion.
Right.
So weight bearing flexion, let's break it down. So weight bearing means you're putting weight on your legs, and then flexion is your knees are bent. So things like deep and repetitive lunges and squats, you're really overloading the front of your knee, especially if you're using weight on top of your own weight, right? And people who already have arthritis under the kneecap, they're going to feel it going from sitting to standing, going downstairs, down hills, you know. So if you could keep things on the level, on the flats, and you can mix things up, meaning that allow your body that natural housekeeping time, so that these little micro tears can heal instead of coalescing into macro tears and macro injuries. So, you know, try not to do the same muscle groups days in a row, consecutive days. Try to mix it up. And so you're giving your body the chance to actually heal.
Amazing. So what do you recommend your clients do? Lunges? Are you saying they should stay away from that?
Not deep and repetitive. It's the deep repetitive ones that really get you. So 30, 40 degrees, that's very effective for quad and for stability.
Right.
I have my younger patients work on yoga, because it's a very good psychologic component, stretching component, and core component. But once you start wearing out your joints, you want to switch over to more like a Pilates based regimen, and modify. If something hurts, you know, that's your body's way of saying, you're hurting me and please
Right.
stop.
Yes.
There's that good muscle burn that we know, and then there's pain and sharp pain. And especially as you get older, sharp pain is often you're overloading a compartment, and it's potentially that you're also wearing out the cartilage, or the cartilage is worn out, and you're putting a lot of stress on a less robust cartilage surface.
I know when I was growing up, especially in the bodybuilding world, it was always no pain, no gain. So you don't believe in that, right?
Not without the right mechanics, and so I have a lot of people who have excellent personal trainers, and I also tell them to supplement that at times, just for a couple of sessions with a physical therapist, just to get different takes on mechanics. And it's really important to be with somebody who is a personal trainer or a physical therapist that can look at you and tell you if your mechanics are correct, and those subtle tweaks. And even if you're not seeing somebody each workout, to have those refresh sessions where somebody's actually watching you and who's thoughtful about the mechanics and cueing you is really invaluable.
So also flexibility, stretching is a key component of this as well.
Sure. And in sports teams, they found that trainers who come in as athletic trainers with a major bend on stretching are very effective in terms of prevention of injuries. And you can see the data year in and year out when that mantra changes, when the ethos of the athletic trainer changes. Interestingly, they found for runners are a weird breed. And so like runners, if you haven't been a stretcher before you run, and then you get into stretching regimen, or vice versa, doesn't work well. So in general for runners, and this is a major study that was done on that, don't mess with your routine. If you're not getting an injury, don't change your shoes. Don't all of a sudden start stretching. Just keep things as is, and certainly, keep your weight lows on the joints. But the stretching thing, I just wanted to let those people know that it might not be a good idea to introduce something new.
Really? When it comes to stretching?
When it comes to stretching, it seems like there's a little group that shouldn't change their routines.
Really? But they should stretch, though. They should stretch.
Not before running, not changing the routine right before running. Interestingly, it increases in this study. Yeah, I was surprised, but I can see it because they're very formulaic, and things work. And you just, it's working, don't change it.
So
now, again, there's injury prevention too, which this was just sort of that little sub-segment that I was bringing out. But like, for example, if you've got daughters who are playing basketball or soccer or volleyball, smartest thing to do is to get a trainer or a physical therapist to come in and before the season do plyometrics, because when women land, they tend to land knock-kneed instead of their knees over their toes, and they have a much higher ACL tear rate in female athletes. And so they have found study after study that if you get these girls to have plyometric training before the season, it decreases the ACL injury rate. And so I think a lot of what we're going to focus in on, and that you focus in on, is injury prevention. Get in front of it before it becomes an issue. And so, stretching for athletes in general, plyometrics, particularly for female athletes,
right.
All super effective.
Nice. Now, are there other ways to treat injuries besides surgery?
Yeah, so there's certain surgeries that are necessary because it's a mechanical issue and you have to have a mechanical response to that, right? So for example, a full thickness rotator cuff tear, that's a larger tear, right? The muscle is pulling back at that tendon, and over time, the tear gets bigger, the muscle atrophies, the tendon retracts, and something that could have been repairable may not be repairable in the future, right? So mechanical things, yeah, Achilles rupture, right? An ACL tear, right? So that's no amount of conditioning is going to recreate that ACL. And so, for example, I'll have people who come to me about ACL injuries, and they want to know, do I need it to repair, right? Yeah, you do, in almost all circumstances, because two reasons. Number one is that when you don't have an ACL, your medial meniscus becomes your stabilizer, and you're going to shred the meniscus, and the meniscus is your shock absorber, and then you're at higher risk of arthritis. Another thing is there's topographic studies of how thick your cartilage is. And in those areas that are loaded when you have an ACL, it's thick.
Right.
And when you don't have an ACL, the tibia shifts forward and you're loading thinner cartilage. And so these are all ways, basically, this is all coming down to decrease your risk of arthritis, because once you don't have cartilage is not coming back with the technology that we have at this point. And the final stage is a total knee replacement, which is a very successful but very difficult surgery to go through. And so really your aim should be preserve cartilage for the knee.
Yeah. So, but how, because we say preserve it, so many of us are having issues doing that. So what causes the loss of cartilage?
So arthritis, and this is so fun for me to talk about because there's so many misperceptions of what is arthritis. So arthritis is flat out cartilage thinning out. That is the definition of arthritis. Now, why is your cartilage thinning out is multivariable. It's usually osteoarthritis. Osteo meaning that it's wear and tear, that it's mechanical. And a lot of that is genetic, whereas how tightly cross-linked is your collagen holding together your matrix. And that's genetic. So you'll see like, oh, my mother had knee replacement. My grandmother was miserable and hobbling around. You'll have that, that history. But sometimes it's just wear and tear in that, most of the time it's wear and tear in that it's overuse and it's overweight. And so either you're overloading it through your activities or through your weight, or your weight and the combination of what you decide to do. Because if you're overweight and you want to lose weight, well, great, do things like stationary bike and swimming where it's very low impact. And then once you get your BMI closer to 25, that's kind of the magic number, go ahead, run, because you're going to have less load on it. Now, I'm talking the vast majority is osteoarthritis. Now, there's also post-traumatic arthritis. So if you've had an injury in the past and a fracture, imagine the trauma that takes to break a bone or to rupture a ligament, right? That's not going to be handled very well with your cartilage. So down the line, you'll have post-traumatic arthritis. If you had a meniscus tear and that meniscus that you've torn is now no longer a good shock absorber. And so now cartilage is going to wear out quicker. So you're at higher risk of arthritis. And then there are biologic reasons for arthritis, like inflammatory arthritis, meaning like psoriasis, lupus, rheumatoid. And, in the old days, before even I was a resident, we'd have people come in with these just terribly disfigured joints from rheumatoid arthritis. And now they have disease modifying anti-rheumatic drugs. And so if you have a family history of rheumatoid or psoriatic, get in touch with a rheumatologist and get ahead of it, because once the cartilage starts breaking down and the joint starts breaking down, it's really a vicious inflammatory pathway. And it really is, look at that word arthritis, the itis part, it's inflammation, because you've got good cartilage. It's like, coefficient of friction is like, ice on ice, right? Really low. And imagine you got ice on one side and then you've got on the other side sandpaper. You're heading towards that way, towards sandpaper. And that scraping, that almost like a shredder, a cheese shredder, as you're going that way, will create arthritis, the inflammation part. And as you're saying, like, what are ways to really help yourself decrease injury? Got to get a hold of the general inflammation in your body, figure out ways not to trigger it, and figure out ways that once it's triggered to calm it down.
Hmm. Do you
Really
recommend
essential.
really essential? And do you recommend nutrition as a way to reduce the inflammation?
Very much so. So there's mechanical, right? So
Mhm.
icing. There's a reason why every training room, every elite athlete ices down after training, because that is a mechanical way to clamp down the little blood vessels and capillaries that are delivering inflammatory factors to the area. So it's decreasing swelling, it's decreasing all that comes with inflammation, the achiness, the tightness. So ice, use that, use nature's mechanism to decrease inflammation. When you feel like you did too much, or just even as a routine, I think a lot of people will see, stars will just have ice packs that all of a sudden when they're done with the game, they just, wrap themselves up, and it's very effective. Again, prevention. Let's get ahead of it before you have to react to inflammation. Prevent inflammation. So get in front of it with icing, and then nutrition. Like, don't. One of my favorite books that I tell patients about is this book by Michael Pollan, Food Rules. Right. So Food Rules is a very, very short book that has a very clear message. And this is it. It's eat food. Okay, how obvious is that? Like, but what we're eating, most of the time, is not food. It's processed. It's corn syrup. It's not really food. It's not something that was grown. Food should be fuel, and what we're eating in many cases is actually really not food. It's chemicals. It's processed and refined sugars. It's corn syrup, masses amounts of corn syrup, and chemicals that you don't even know about, like petroleum and in food sources. Food sources. So eat food. Eat something that actually organically happens in nature. So eat food. Eat less. Right. So, there's that kind of magical 80% rule. Just eat 80% of what you feel like you need to eat. Don't go that last 20% where you can feel your stomach, right? So eat food, eat less, and mostly plants. So, and I've seen it in your podcast. I mean, we can say it a million times to people, please eat plants, eat more plants. Part of it is kind of to transition into something else. It's about blue zones. Have you heard of blue zones?
Yes.
So blue zones are people that
Yes.
it was, I think, in 2004, National Geographic had this expedition, and they looked for places where people lived to 100 and over at 10 times the average rate in the United States, right? And Sardinia is one of those places in Italy, right? And you look at these places, they identified 5 blue zones, right? But Sardinia was the leading one. And they eat food. They actually eat things that are grown in nature, right? And if you're going to a store and you see something that looks exactly the same, like 100 tomatoes, they're all stacked and they look exactly the same, well, there's something wrong with that, right? So go to your local farmer's market, know where something is sourced. That's not natural for things to look like that, right? So they eat food, actual food, and they eat very little meat. It's mostly plant-based. I mean, they're not extremists about it. They have it on special occasions and on Sunday. And they have a very anti-inflammatory diet naturally. And they move not because they're in a little rat in a gym, moving around or whatever. They actually, their life is movement, and I don't think many of us are lucky enough to have that. But the people who are shepherds in Sardinia are doing very well for themselves. They're at a much higher rate than anybody else in terms of living to 100 and more. So if you can figure out a way to incorporate movement into your life, that's just invaluable. So move. But I think another thing is, inflammatory, and anti-inflammatory doesn't have to not be fun either, So they drink 2 glasses of wine a day on average, right? Well, why is that? Well, it has resveratrol in it with, a lot of other things, but that's really a powerful anti-inflammatory. interestingly enough, if anybody out there is a wine connoisseur, they have their version of the Grenache grape there. The pronunciation of it escapes me once in a while, but I'll harken back and figure it out. But they have a Grenache grape that they grow there that has 2 or 3 times the concentration of resveratrol compared to the grapes that we have. And so, yeah, you can, like coconut grape. I'm gonna butcher, but it's a Grenache grape that is grown in Sardinia, and they have 1 or 2 glasses a day. So they drink in mild to moderation. And, you don't have to do that. You can get, supplements that have resveratrol on it, in it. And that's naturally anti-inflammatory. Yeah, sure, you could pop some Advil or Celebrex, but hey, things like polyphenols that are in a lot of plants and wines and berries have anti-inflammatory properties that do it the same way that these medications do it. For example, COX-1 and COX-2, those are inflammatory enzymes, right? And ibuprofen, Celebrex inhibit cyclooxygenase, right? And cyclooxygenase converts arachidonic acid, which we have in our membranes, to prostaglandins that cause inflammation, right? And cyclooxygenase, if you can inhibit that, you're going to have less inflammation. So sure, you can have the kidney effects of Advil and the GI upset, or you can, have supplements that have polyphenols in it that are plant-based, or you can actually eat foods that are high in those naturally. Again, beans and berries and grapes. There's a reserve of those. So yeah, preventative through nutrition, anti-inflammatory through nutrition.
Very good, very good. But now, speaking of which, anti-inflammatory, nutrition, berries, I understand that you work with a company called 305 Life. Talk about that, why you got involved with them, and what is it about their products, their brand that attracted you to them?
So, just like in any story, there's sort of roundabout ways where you get to where you are. So, huge 49er fan. And I was in Miami at the Super Bowl, the ill-fated Super Bowl in 2020 against KC. And I saw Pitbull at a concert there. I'd never seen him before. And in between his sets, he was talking about his mantra and his outlook on life and the positivity and I agreed so much with what he was putting out there in terms of work really hard and do something that makes you feel like you are either helping people and or bringing civilization forward. That there's meaning in your life. And actually, if you look at those blue zones, I'll get back to that, in general, seek things that work and try to figure out why it works, right? So the blue zones, they work, right? And one of the things that they found is that they have a strong sense of community and a purpose. They wake up in the morning with purpose and whatever they may be doing. And that was something that, Armando Pitbull was really on, is that have a purpose, and he has a purpose. So, we see the flash of what he does on stage, but he has these schools that he has founded called SLAM schools, which are sports, leadership, arts, and I think it might be music, but it's these are charter schools, totally public schools that he has founded, starting in Miami, and then now also in Georgia and in Nevada, where he's giving back and he's educating kids and giving them purpose, and it gives him purpose, right? And so it's really, it spoke to how I feel like when I was at Harvard. I founded a program where we took Harvard kids and went to projects nearby and did the Head Start programs, and so taught literacy to kids. So studies show that if you show kids how to read before the third grade, up to that point, you're learning how to read. And then at that point it switches and you are learning by reading, right? And if you haven't gotten to the point of reading at that point, you're done because they've already assumed that. And so early childhood education is super important. And he believes in that. I believe that. So I just felt like, wow, I really agree with his vibe, with his mission. And so then a friend of mine, Mark Schenkel, had teamed up with this really cool personal trainer, Roger Ewan, and they had worked with Armando about nutrition and things to keep him hydrated. And he wanted to stay healthy because he wants to do all these things. And he tried this supplement called 305. Well, eventually that was called 305 Life because he is Mr. 305, and found that it really made him feel better. And they'd done quite a bit of research to figure out what to put in these products. And I then was approached by Mr. Schenkel and said, hey, can completely, out of the blue and without any connection to Pitbull, and say, I'm partnering with Armando because he believes in it. And I know that you have a strong basis in sports medicine. We want to bring a medical aspect in terms of movement to this product. Can you take a look at the ingredients and see if you believe in it too? And I looked at it and I was like, wow, this is exactly what I would want my patients to be taking. It's basically big anti-inflammatory, I do cortisone injections, for people with advanced arthritis, but I would prefer to be doing things that are a more natural bend, not to get to that stage. And so this product for me was really meaningful because they really had a huge emphasis on polyphenols, plant-based anti-inflammatories. So quercetin and resveratrol for sure. And then, I have patients who have, muscle spasms or that they have a hard time bouncing back. And a lot of that is magnesium and potassium deficiencies. And so, for example, like when we were in med school, somebody had a potassium deficiency, we eat a banana each day. Well, that's not enough because you can't get potassium into your cells without magnesium. In fact, magnesium is what drives calcium and potassium in and out of cells. So I looked at them like, wow, somebody really knew what they were talking about when they came up with this proprietary blend, because they didn't just have potassium, they had magnesium and potassium, right? And then, it was just during the COVID break, the pandemic too, and it was high in immune system boosters such as vitamin C and zinc, which, when my patients are healing from surgery, I say, hey, load up on the zinc, and here's a product that had it. And, sure, you could drink your 2 glasses of wine, but the resveratrol, the quercetin, the quercetin is, they're both in these products. And so I believed in the ingredients and I was like, this is a good fit for me. And then just to have that same life outlook that Pitbull had shaping this, and then the proceeds partially go to his slam schools. And I was like, well, then that's perfect for me. This is a great fit.
Wow. So I'm blown away by just hearing about it, because again, I often talk about the importance of vitamin C and zinc and, even D. And you mentioned quercetin, right? So, and you're saying that you rather treat the patients naturally than have to give them a cortisol shot, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Because, things that are, quote, unnatural often have side effects, that we have to deal with. And, nature has spent a really long time figuring things out for us, right? Or figuring out things out, actually not for us, for themselves, right? So let me give you an example. I recently read this book, Code Breaker, by Walter Isaacson, who is an incredible biographer, and it's about Jennifer Doudna and CRISPR technology and mRNA technology, right? And this is going to be a really powerful method in the future for gene editing, CRISPR technology, where it's going in there and finding DNA sequences and very laser cutting them and potentially switching things out. So I mean, this could be the cure for Huntington's someday, or cystic fibrosis, right? And we saw this in terms of how quickly could we make a vaccine that was so targeted with mRNA technology. So where did this even come from, right? Did we just come up with it? Actually, one of the earliest stages of figuring out CRISPR technology were these guys who were working for a yogurt company. And yogurt needs cultures. They need their bacteria that they grow the yogurt, right? And viruses were attacking their yogurt cultures, right? And they're trying to figure out, how are we going to keep our yogurt cultures going, right? Millions of years, bacteria have been fighting viruses. We're just starting to, right? But they've been fighting it for millions of years. And how did they do it? Through CRISPR technology, basically. They have in their little cells little stores of the DNA, mRNA sequences, right? And when they get attacked, they recognize it. And then they have this protein called a Cas protein that cuts it up and gets rid of the virus. So this is their immune system, right? Yes. And so this technology came from millions of years of bacteria fighting viruses, right? And so even things like resveratrol, right? Why do plants make resveratrol, right? Well, because fungus has been attacking grapes for,
eons,
generations, eons, right? And so, you get these big fungal attacks on grape populations, and they decimate the vineyards. So when a grape is being attacked, it will make chemicals to fight back. And resveratrol is one of those chemicals to fight back. It is anti-inflammatory, it's antioxidant, it's, it can help with cancer treatments by helping chemotherapy agents work better. It can help prevent some cancers, right? There's actually been research in animal models. So nature has been fighting attackers for a very long time, and we would be really smart to harness that evolution. And that's why I believe in plant-based solutions, because I feel like, why reinvent the wheel?
Oh, exactly. Nature's done it for us, right?
And we just got to figure out the chemical mechanisms of how they've done that.
Yes. And, I speak to doctors all the time, and but some doctors espouse a pill for every ill, and I know that you don't, and a few other doctors I've spoken with as well. If there's something there that nature can handle, can take care of, why not heal your body naturally, right? But I understand Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like, for me, like, my theory on being a doctor is something called incrementalism, is just less intervention.
Wow.
Harness nature, harness physical activity, harness prevention, and then add on when it's not working. And so, sure, there's certain things like, look, I'm a surgeon. I believe in surgery. Myself, when I had the kids, I had a C-section because they were twins, right? So I'm not anti-surgery in any way, right? There's a reason for it. Like, if you have, a tumor that's cancer, please go. Do not all of a sudden start taking supplements, and that's not going to go well for you. Supplement with supplements, right? Get things taken care of, but try to avoid it in the first place. Live a life that decreases the oxidative stress in your body. Keep your telomeres strong. Again, you're looking for prevention. This is going to be a whole other conversation, but telomeres are like these little caps on the ends of your DNA. It's almost like a shoelace. You got little caps on the end. Those grow and shrink based on how you live your life, your lifestyle. If your little caps on your DNA are not very strong, you have a higher risk of cancer. So grow your telomeres, live the healthy lifestyle, get in front of things.
Yes.
And if you don't, or if you can't, or there's genetics, let us help you. But, let's come at it both ways.
Yes, that's beautiful. Now, if someone wanted to find out more information about the 305 brand, where would they go?
Yeah, it's 305-life.com. And it has all the ingredients in there, some testimonials. But, also over time, they're going to have my blog posts. And I'm going to make these really cerebral. So if you really want to understand how something works, read these, because one by one, I'm going to go through all the ingredients and really let you know, break down the words that you're going to hear thrown around. So for example, you might have heard the term oxidative stress. And what I want to do is to go back and say, all right, what actually is oxidation? So the very basics, you've got a molecule. And a molecule has protons and neutrons in the center, and then a cloud of electrons on the outside. And when a molecule gains an electron, it's called reduction. When it loses an electron, it's called oxidation. So if you've got a molecule that has lost an electron, it's roaming around unstable. That's called a free radical. It is on a mission at that point to get back to stability, to grab an electron from whatever it can. And so if you have a whole bunch of these molecules running around, these free radicals, then they're scavenging in your body for electrons. And they might attack things like your DNA. And that's unfortunate, because if the DNA is affected, well, that could trigger cancer. And so there's many reasons why an unstable molecule running around your body, desperate to grab an electron, can harm you. And that's the reason why you should be looking for an antioxidant, something that goes around and quenches this free radical, scavenges these scavengers. And I feel like if you understand the process of what's going on in your body, if you can visualize it instead of just throwing around a term like oxidative stress, then you'll be motivated to actually address it, do it. So I was a history major, right? And my hero when I was growing up, Michael Dillingham, he was a history major. When I got into Harvard, he took me aside and said, Sanaz, you should be a history major. You got to take all your pre-med classes and ace those, right? But think about it, because you can communicate with people. And if a patient doesn't understand why, they're not going to do it. A third of medications prescribed are never taken, right? And then how are you helping anyone if you're not getting it across to them? And so I want to get knowledge across so it makes sense, and then there's buy-in, and then that's what makes change.
Oh, most definitely. Wow. Very well said, and again, to be able to explain it so that the average person can understand it is so important. Because if you're talking to me in medical terms, in terminology, or scientific terminology, technical terms, I won't understand it. But to break it down so even I, or even a public school student could understand it, I think that's the key. And so you really believe in 305 and what it's doing for people.
Yeah, I believe in the ingredients, and I believe in the mission.
In the mission.
And I really just feel that people need to read labels, read what you're taking in. And in fact, actually, even having said that, I really wish that people would eat things that didn't have labels. So supplements have to have labels on it, right? Yeah. But for God's sakes, when you go into a store, try not to buy things with labels on it. That's not often food, right? Yes. So go around the edges of the store, because that's where the fresh things are, because they want in and out easy to be able to turn things over. In the center of the store, that's where they put the stuff that could last 100 years, right? And they don't have to get to it very easily. So eat food, try to eat things that don't have labels on it. An apple doesn't have a label on it. A chicken breast doesn't have a label on it. Try not to eat things with labels. So I'm saying read the labels. And I'm saying that mostly about, supplements, but for food, please try to stay away from things with labels on it.
I know in a lot of grocery stores, you'll see where it says the healthy food section. So if there's a healthy food section in the store, what's the other food? Not healthy, right?
Right.
So I'm like, think about that, right? If they have to put healthy food section in a certain area, that means the rest of the areas are not healthy for you. So maybe you shouldn't be eating that other food, right? And I often tell people...
One of the nurses in the operating room has a hilarious sticker on her locker, and it cracks me up every time I see it. But it says, it shows this big fat, bunny-looking thing, and this little bunny guy, and the big fat bunny guy says, "Wait, so you're saying you are what you eat?" and he thinks about it and he's like, then I should eat a skinny person. But that's like a funny way of saying it. But yes, you are what you eat. Like literally your cells, everything in you is what you put in you. It's not magically appearing. Like you're constantly turning over cells.
Yes.
And those ingredients, those building blocks, who you are actually physically is what you just put into your body. And think about that.
That's very, very powerful, because the human body, replicates every so often with new cells, but you're feeding yourself those new cells. You're feeding yourself on a cellular level, but what are you feeding your cells, right? Makes so much sense to bring that home. It really does. So if we were to sum this up, if I was to ask you, okay, what are the keys to a healthy and injury-free body? What would you say?
Great. So I would say to eat well, to keep your BMI down. Again and again, I've heard in your podcast, and I'm just going to say it again just for repetition, eat mostly a plant-based diet, right? Yes. And move and have purpose in your life. And, a lot of what I'm saying, I'm not making up. I'm very evidence-based, right? Actually, all of what I'm saying is evidence-based. Go online and look at the blue zones, right? These are things that somehow these people have figured out and that are commonalities. Everything I'm saying is a blue zone value. And, with the 305 life, that whole ethos of the 305 life rang true to me because it was a very blue zone issue, very blue zone product. And I think that you should just go through and just look at that. Remember that you need community, don't build walls. Here's another thing. I'm a history major, right? And there's a lot of famous stories of, times when, they're at odds with American Indians and they were basically prisoners, right? And so they had taken prisoners, Caucasian prisoners, and Indian Americans had come to the Western culture. And there is apparently maybe none zero accounts of the prisoners who had American Indians had come to the Western areas who did not want to go back. But in many occasions, a lot of the Westerners who had been taken into Native American communities literally had to be shackled and brought back to their own communities. And they did debriefings and figured out why. Well, it's the community living. There's a sense that you need to have to be a part of the community, to have multi-generational living, so be good to the old people in your life, because then the young people are going to look at that and that's how they're going to treat you. And besides, study after study shows that multi-generational living and activity makes for happiness in all generations, right? So be connected. These are not things that are just kind of touchy-feely, nebulous, spiritual, all that's great. They're actually health benefits. This will make you live longer. So yeah, I'd encourage people to embrace that ethos.
Yes, beautiful. Now, how can my listeners and my viewers find out more about you, Dr. Hariri?
Yeah, so I 305-Life, that website is great to look at all the products. If you're interested in reading just about different stories of how people have lived their best life, that book is coming out, Brilliance Beyond Borders. So that's coming out. It was interesting. To be brief, a couple of years ago, I got a call from a lady who was an immigrant here, and she was a journalist, and she said, my life dream is to put together a guidebook for immigrants who come here and who want to make it, but are not quite sure what are the different paths and might not have access to people who have done well for themselves in their own communities. And I want to put together those stories so that somebody can access that easily. And so, last year I got an email out of the blue and said, hey, this is going to be published, and there's a chapter on you. I was so grateful because whenever a young person comes to me, I'm just so honored and I'm so grateful to be able to share what I know, because so many people ahead of me did that for me, throughout Lenore Horowitz, Dr. Dillingham, Dr. Amy Ladd, just people who took time out and said, hey, this is what worked for me, take it or leave it. And I took most of it, right?
Right.
And so anyway, so Brilliance Beyond Borders is just a collection of stories about people who came from other countries to the United States, and what they found was what kept them going and what worked for them. So that's another good way. Thanks for asking that question.
And that's your book.
No, they wrote it about different stories, and I'm one chapter in it. So this lady wrote about me, one of the chapters, but there's many chapters about people who have done different paths in the United States and what they would pass on to somebody sitting in front of them. And so you're basically getting like the advice of many people writing one book, and I think that's really special.
Oh, most definitely. Do you have a website yourself?
Well, my medical website is drsanaz.com, ERSANAZ. So if anybody is in the Bay Area and needs medical advice or a physical exam, come on in. I'm happy to treat you. But try to prevent that. So that's what I'm gonna say. Try to prevent that.
That is cool. No Instagram, right? Right now, no Instagram.
Yeah.
But the information.
I'm buried in clinic, in surgery, and
yes. Too busy for that stuff right now. Well, Dr. Sanaz Hariri, on behalf of my nonprofit organization, Body Scope of New York, I truly want to thank you for coming on my show today.
Well, thank you so much for giving me this platform. I really believe in it, and it's so special for me to be able to, I give this my outlook on life to people who ask, but it's one-on-one, and then to have this ability to send it out to more people if it resonates, I'm really honored.
Well, it will definitely get out there, and I just believe in what you're saying, and I know it's from the heart, and you're adding so much value. So I'm sure that my listeners are going to really, and my viewers are going to really benefit from the information that you shared today. It really is special, and I mean that, very special. And I truly hope that this program to my listeners and viewers have been encouraging, inspiring, that you will continue tuning in to my 6 Weeks of Fitness podcast. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for the show, please leave them in the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe or even email me at vince@6weeks.com. And don't forget that we don't stop exercising because we grow old. We grow old because we stop exercising. Take care of yourself.